A young boy saving for his mum's gift meets Henry Cavill in a jewelry store. What starts as a kind gesture from Henry Cavill turns into a life-changing moment. How will this chance encounter transform the boy's future? We'll make you surprised. Subscribe William's Wisdom Stories for more interesting stories. Let's start. James clutched a handful of crumpled bills and loose coins in his pocket, his heart pounding with both excitement and nervousness. For weeks, he'd saved every spare dollar, mowing lawns, skipping off to school snacks, even cashing in on favors from neighbors. Today, the moment had finally come. He was going to buy his hard-working mum a birthday gift that would show her how much he appreciated everything she did. Life wasn't easy for James and his mother. She worked long hours as a waitress at a local diner in Springfield, Missouri, always sacrificing her own needs to make sure James had everything he needed. James knew how hard she worked, often coming home late and exhausted. His heart ached to do something for her, something that would show her just how much her sacrifices meant. As James walked down the street towards the small jewelry store he had spotted a week ago, the jingling of the coins in his pockets seemed to echo louder than usual. His mind raced as he imagined his mother's face when she would open the gift. He had noticed a delicate necklace in the store window, nothing too fancy, but beautiful in its simplicity. A perfect reflection of his mum. She had never been one to splurge on herself, and James had never seen her wear any jewelry apart from the inexpensive earrings she wore to work. His steps quickened, but so did the knot of doubt in his stomach. What if it wasn't enough? What if the necklace cost more than the money he had saved? He hadn't dared to go inside before today, fearful that the price tag would crush his hopes. But no matter what, he was determined to find a gift for his mum. If the necklace was out of reach, he would find something else, anything, to let her know how much he loved her. As he approached the store, James hesitated outside, peering through the glass window. The necklace was still there, glittering under the soft lights, more stunning than he remembered. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door, the bell overhead chiming softly. The elderly shopkeeper looked up from behind the counter and gave him a kind smile. "Hello there, young man. Can I help you with something special today?" the shopkeeper asked, his voice warm and welcoming. James swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. It's for my mum. I've been saving up to buy her a birthday gift," he said, pulling out the crumpled bills and loose coins from his pocket. He laid them on the counter carefully, not wanting to seem too embarrassed by the small pile. The shopkeeper's eyes twinkled as he looked at the money, then at the determined boy standing before him. "A birthday gift, huh? You must love your mum very much." James nodded again, this time with more conviction. "She works really hard. I want to get her something nice, something she deserves." The shopkeeper glanced towards the necklace James had been eyeing. He reached into the display case and gently lifted it, holding it up to the light. "This one caught your eye, didn't it?" James's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, sir, but I'm not sure if I have enough," he admitted, glancing down at the money, suddenly feeling small in the grand scheme of things. The shopkeeper smiled, his gaze softening. "Let's see what we can do." James held his breath as the man placed the necklace on the counter and began to count the money in front of him. With each coin that dropped into the shopkeeper's hand, James's pulse quickened, his hopes teetering between possibility and disappointment. When the shopkeeper finished counting, he looked at James for a moment, as if considering something. Then, to James's surprise, the man pushed the necklace towards him. "I think you've got just enough," the shopkeeper said with a wink, "and I believe your mum's going to love it." But James couldn't believe his ears. "Really? Are you sure?" His voice trembled, not from doubt, but from overwhelming gratitude. The shopkeeper nodded. "It's not about the price, son. It's about the thought, the effort, and the love you've put into this gift. That's worth more than any amount of money." James's eyes filled with tears as he carefully picked up the necklace, cradling it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. He thanked the shopkeeper profusely before leaving the store, the weight of his pocket now replaced by a heart full of pride and anticipation. As he walked home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk, James couldn't help but imagine his mother's reaction. He pictured her smile, her eyes welling up with happy tears as she realized just how much he appreciated her. He had always told her he loved her, but this was different. This was something he had worked for, sacrificed for, all to make her feel special. By the time he reached their small apartment, James was practically buzzing with excitement. He waited anxiously for his mother to come home from her shift, rehearsing in his head how he would present the gift to her. When she finally walked through the door, her face tired but warm as always, James couldn't contain himself any longer. He handed her the small box, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched her open it, his eyes dropping to the printed words printed on the front, which read, "Ghosts rise the grave." Her eyes widened in disbelief as she pulled out the delicate necklace. "James, this is beautiful. How did you—" "I saved up," he said quickly, unable to hide the proud smile spreading across his face. "I wanted to do something special for you, Mom. You do so much for me, and I wanted you to know how much I appreciate it." Tears brimmed in her eyes as she looked at her son, and in that moment, all the long hours, all the sacrifices, felt worth it. She pulled him into a tight hug, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, sweetheart. This means more to me than you'll ever know." And as James held her, he realized that while the necklace was a symbol of his love, the real gift was in that moment, knowing he had made his mom feel truly cherished, just as she had done for him every single day. Under the warm glow of the setting sun, James pushed open the door of a modest jewelry store. Nestled between a bakery and a thrift shop, the small bell above the door chimed softly, signaling his arrival, and the elderly shopkeeper behind the counter glanced up, offering a kind nod. James's heart pounded with a mix of nervousness and excitement. This was the moment he had worked for, weeks of mowing lawns, saving every spare dollar for his hard-working mum's birthday. As he wandered through the aisles, his eyes scanned the glimmering displays. His mum didn't wear much jewelry, but he wanted something special, something that would show her how much he appreciated her. Then his gaze settled on a simple silver bracelet on the second shelf. It wasn't flashy, but it had a quiet elegance, a delicate band with a heart-shaped charm. He could already see her wearing it, smiling as she sipped coffee after a long shift at the diner. Carefully, James lifted the bracelet, his fingers trembling as he checked the price tag. His stomach churned. He had just enough. Barely. With a deep breath, he approached the counter, setting the bracelet down with a mix of pride and apprehension. The shopkeeper's gentle smile encouraged him as James began counting out his crumpled bills and loose change, each coin representing the hard work and small sacrifices he'd made. Suddenly, the bell chimed again, but this time the sound was louder, more commanding. The shopkeeper's eyes shifted toward the entrance, his brows lifting in surprise. James glanced over his shoulder, his heart skipping a beat as the sound of confident footsteps approached. A tall man in a hoodie and jeans strolled into the store, his presence magnetic. It took James a moment to realize who it was. Henry Cavill, the man from movies and interviews. He was right here, in this small-town jewelry store. Cavill's deep voice cut through the air as he greeted the shopkeeper with a casual nod and began browsing the displays. The air felt charged with curiosity and quiet anticipation. Trying to refocus, James returned to counting his money, his hands now shaking slightly. "Nice bracelet," Cavill's voice suddenly interrupted, making James jump. He turned to see the actor standing nearby, his gaze fixed on the bracelet. Thanks," James muttered, his voice barely audible. "Who's it for?" Cavill asked, his tone friendly and genuinely curious. "It's for my mom. Her birthday's tomorrow," James replied, his voice gaining strength. "She works really hard, and I just wanted to get her something nice." Cavill smiled, his expression softening. "That's really thoughtful of you. What made you choose this one?" James hesitated, then said, "It's simple, but I think she'll like it. She doesn't wear much jewelry, but I wanted her to know I notice how much she does for me." Cavill nodded, clearly impressed. "That's a great reason. It's a beautiful piece." Before James could say anything more, Cavill stepped forward, his gaze shifting to the shopkeeper. "How much is it?" $56, the shopkeeper replied, glancing at the bracelet. Cavill raised an eyebrow, then looked at James. "Tell you what, I'll take care of this for you. Consider it a birthday gift for your mom, from both of us." James's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, what? You don't have to do that." "I know," Cavill said with a grin, pulling out $100 bill, "but I want to. What you're doing for your mom is what really matters." The shopkeeper took the bill, handing Cavill the change, but he waved it off. James stood there, frozen, clutching the bracelet in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. Before he could speak, Cavill asked, "Do you have any big dreams, James? Anything you've always wanted to do?" James blinked, caught off guard by the sudden question. "I guess. I'd like to build something one day. Maybe a house for my mom, so she doesn't have to work so hard." Cavill's eyes lit up with interest. "That's an amazing goal. You know, people out there are working on ideas like that, but it starts with someone just like you." End of section 22. James blushed. "I don't know if I could really do it." Cavill smiled, leaning closer. "Every big idea starts small, James. It's not about where you begin. It's about having the courage to start." As James looked at the man who had once seemed so distant, he felt a spark of possibility. Cavill handed him his phone. "Give me your mum's number. I'll help you get started." James hesitated, then scribbled his mum's number. Cavill nodded, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Go. Give her the best birthday ever, James. I'll be in touch." The next day, James handed his mum the bracelet, tears in his eyes. Little did they know, this small act of kindness was about to transform their lives in ways they never could have imagined. Suddenly the doorbell chimed again, but this time the sound seemed louder, more commanding. The shopkeeper's gaze shifted to the entrance, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. James glanced over his shoulder, his heart racing as the sound of heavy, confident footsteps filled the small store. A tall man in a casual hoodie and jeans strolled inside. His presence was understated, yet magnetic. It took James a moment to realize who it was. It was Henry Cavill. The actor, known for his roles in blockbuster films like Man of Steel and The Witcher, was standing right there, in this small-town jewelry store. What could he possibly be doing in Springfield, Missouri? James couldn't quite believe it. He had seen Henry Cavill on the big screen countless times, but to see him here, in this tiny, inconspicuous store, felt surreal. His mind struggled to make sense of the situation. "Afternoon," Henry Cavill greeted the shopkeeper with a casual nod, his deep voice cutting through the stillness of the store. He began browsing the displays, but it was clear that everyone in the store was aware of his presence, watching to see what he would do next. James, trying to focus on the task at hand, went back to counting his money, but his hands shook as he laid out the bills, his concentration slipping. He was painfully aware of the actor now in the store. The shopkeeper, equally distracted, glanced at Henry Cavill while tallying James's cash, his eyes flicking between the boy and the famous actor. "Nice bracelet." Henry Cavill's voice suddenly broke the quiet, causing James to jump. The actor had moved closer, his gaze fixed on the silver bracelet in James's hand. Thanks," James muttered, barely able to speak, his voice faltering in the face of the actor's attention. He wasn't used to this kind of interaction, especially not with someone as famous as Henry Cavill. "Who's it for?" Henry Cavill asked, his tone friendly and genuinely curious. James hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of Henry Cavill's attention on him. The shopkeeper offered an encouraging smile, silently urging James to share. "It's for my mum. Her birthday's tomorrow," James explained, his voice gaining a bit of strength. "She works really hard and I wanted to get her something nice." Henry Cavill's expression softened. He nodded thoughtfully, as if moved by James's words. "That's thoughtful of you. What made you choose this one?" he asked. James felt his face flush. He had never expected to have this kind of conversation with someone like Henry Cavill, but the actor's warmth made it easier to open up. "It's simple but elegant. She doesn't wear a lot of jewelry, but I think she'll like it. I want her to know I notice how much she does for me." Henry Cavill studied the boy for a moment, his eyes full of admiration. He gave a small, appreciative smile. "How old are you?" he asked. 13, James replied, clutching the bracelet a little tighter in his hand as he tried to steady himself. Henry Cavill smiled. 13, and already saving up for a gift like this. That's impressive." James shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed but grateful for the encouragement. "My mom's been through a lot. She works long hours at the diner and always makes sure I have everything I need. I just wanted to do something special for her." Henry Cavill nodded, his face showing that he understood all too well. He looked at the shopkeeper. "How much is it?" he asked, his voice still calm and steady. $56, the shopkeeper replied, glancing at James's money. "And he's got it all right here." Henry Cavill raised an eyebrow. $56, huh? He paused, taking in the scene for a moment, before turning back to James. "Tell you what, I'll take care of this for you. Consider it a birthday gift for your mum, from both of us." He handed the bag to James, who gratefully inspected its contents. James's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, what? You don't have to do that," he stammered, completely caught off guard. This was a gesture that James never could have anticipated. "Nearly. I know I don't have to," Henry Cavill said with a kind smile. "But I want to. What you're doing here, it's a reminder of what really matters. A lot of people forget how powerful a simple, thoughtful act can be. You've got a good heart, James." Before James could process what was happening, Henry Cavill reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed the shopkeeper a $100 bill, more than enough to cover the bracelet and more. "Keep the change," he said with a nod, flashing a friendly smile. James stood frozen, still holding the bracelet in his hand. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of the overwhelming kindness he was receiving. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," Henry Cavill replied gently. "Just make sure your mum has a great birthday, okay?" James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. As Henry Cavill turned to leave the store, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor, James felt like he was in a dream. He had always admired the actor, but now he admired him even more. Not for his fame, but for his generosity and the kindness he had shown in this moment. As the door swung shut behind Henry Cavill, the shopkeeper turned to James, who was still holding the bracelet, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "That's something you'll never forget, kid," the shopkeeper said with a wink. "A little kindness can go a long way." James could only nod in agreement, his hands shaking as he finally slipped the bracelet into his pocket. He was leaving with more than just a gift for his mum. He was leaving with a memory that would stay with him forever. He had learned, in that single moment, that even the smallest gestures could make the biggest impact. That night, as he wrapped the bracelet and prepared it for his mom's birthday the next day, James couldn't stop thinking about what Henry Cavill had said. It wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about showing someone you cared. And James was determined to make his mom's birthday as special as he possibly could, carrying the lesson he had learned with him always. As the transaction wrapped up, Henry Cavill turned to James, his expression serious yet kind. "James," he said, his voice steady, "do you have any big dreams? Anything you've always wanted to do?" James blinked, caught off guard by the question. He had never really thought of his future beyond the immediate goal of helping his mum. "I don't know," he began slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess I'd like to do something that makes my mum proud. Maybe build something like you." Henry Cavill's eyes lit up with curiosity, as if James had just sparked something inside him. "Build something? Like what?" he asked, leaning in slightly, eager to hear more. James hesitated for a moment, unsure if his idea was worth sharing. But something about the warmth in Henry Cavill's gaze made him feel safe, like his dreams weren't too small to matter. The words started to flow. "She always talks about how she wishes we had a better house. Maybe I could build houses, ones that people like us could afford." Henry Cavill smiled, clearly impressed by the boy's ambition. "That's a big idea, James. You know, people out there are trying to solve problems like that, but not everyone has your perspective." He paused, clearly thinking. "You have the heart for it. That's the most important part." James shifted nervously, his hands fumbling with the bracelet. "It's just something I've thought about. I don't know if I could really do it." His voice trailed off, filled with doubt. "With doubt?" Henry Cavill leaned in, his tone steady and reassuring. "Let me tell you something. Every big idea starts with someone just like you. It doesn't matter how small you start. What matters is that you care enough to try. The world needs people who are willing to dream and take action, even if it's just a little at a time." The words hit James deeply. He felt a fire ignite within him, something he hadn't recognized before. For the first time, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. Maybe his dream of building homes wasn't too far-fetched after all. Then Henry Cavill did something that took James completely by surprise. "Tell you what," he said, a determined glint in his eye. "I'm going to help you get started. Consider it an investment in your future." "Day?" James's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" His voice was barely above a whisper, still trying to process what he was hearing. Was this really happening? Was Henry Cavill, the Henry Cavill, offering to help him? Henry Cavill smiled, the kind of smile that made James feel like anything was possible. He pulled out his phone and tapped a few keys, his focus entirely on James. "Give me your mum's name and phone number. I want to make sure you two have what you need to dream a little bigger." "James," James smiled at him. "Dare you do." With a mix of excitement and disbelief, James gave him the information, his hands trembling slightly as he shared the details. His mum would never believe this. How could she? Henry Cavill was a movie star, not someone who would normally walk into their lives like this. Henry Cavill tucked his phone away, his demeanor still confident yet completely sincere. "I'll be in touch," he promised, giving James a final, warm smile. "For now, go make her birthday unforgettable. And remember, dreams are meant to be big." James stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. The famous actor, the incredible gesture, and the new, life-changing direction that was suddenly open to him. It felt surreal, but more than that, it felt like a sign. Maybe his dreams weren't so impossible after all. "Thank you," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't forget this." His hand found hers under her jacket and she turned. "I'm sure you won't," Henry Cavill said, giving him a nod of reassurance. "Now, go on. You've got a birthday to make special." As Henry Cavill walked out of the store, James stood there for a few moments longer, just taking it all in. The small-town shop, the bracelet, the unexpected encounter with one of Hollywood's biggest stars. It was more than James could have ever imagined. But the most important part wasn't the gift, or the celebrity, or even the money. It was the belief that Henry Cavill had instilled in him. The idea that he could dream bigger, that his aspirations weren't out of reach. That night, as he wrapped the bracelet in colorful paper for his mum, James's mind raced with possibilities. He could do this. He could actually make something of his dreams. Maybe he couldn't build houses today, but he would start somewhere. And when he did, it would be because of the words of one man, someone who had given him hope, not just for a future of his own, but for his mother's future too. Tomorrow, on his mum's birthday, James wasn't just giving her a gift. He was giving her a promise. A promise that he would work to make their lives better, to build something that would make her proud. And no matter how long it took, he wouldn't give up. The next day, as the sun began to rise over Springfield, Missouri, James couldn't contain the excitement in his chest. His heart pounded as he carefully wrapped the silver bracelet, the one he'd bought with so much care and effort, in colorful paper. It was a small token, but it carried with it everything he wished to express to his mum: his love, gratitude, and a deep sense of admiration for everything she did for him. When he walked into the small kitchen that morning, his mum was already up, preparing a simple breakfast. The worn apron she wore hung from her shoulders, a testament to the many hours she'd spent working, serving others, and keeping their modest home running. She turned to greet him with a tired smile, but it was a smile full of warmth and care, just like always. "Happy birthday, Mom," James said, his voice cracking slightly as he held out the small gift, his hands trembling with anticipation. She looked at him, surprised, her eyes softening as she saw the neatly wrapped present. "James, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted, his voice steadying as he handed her the gift. "You've done so much for me. I wanted to do something special for you." Her hands gently peeled back the wrapping paper, and when she saw the bracelet, her breath caught in her throat. It was a simple piece, but its elegance spoke volumes. A soft silver band with intricate, delicate designs that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of the kitchen. Her fingers brushed over it, and she looked at James, her eyes starting to fill with tears. "James," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's beautiful. I don't know what to say." James's eyes filled with tears of his own as he watched her, so moved by the look on her face. "I just want you to know that I see how hard you work, and I appreciate everything you do for me. This is for you, Mum. You deserve it." For a moment, they simply stood there, words lost in the silence of the moment. The simple act of giving, the thoughtfulness behind it, seemed to hold more meaning than anything they'd ever shared before. For the first time, James felt like he was able to give something back, and in that moment, he realized it wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol of everything he hoped to build for her in the future. But what neither of them knew was that this gift, this moment, was just the beginning of something far greater. As they sat down to breakfast, laughing and talking about the day ahead, the phone rang. James's mum reached for the receiver, and when she answered, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Hello," she said, her voice shaky. "This is she. Yes, I remember you. You're calling about James." James watched his mother, confusion growing in his chest as she listened intently, nodding and saying little more than a few soft ahuns. After a moment, she hung up the phone, her face a mix of shock and wonder. "Who was that, Mom?" James asked, his curiosity piqued. She turned to him, her eyes wide. "James, you're not going to believe this. It was Henry Cavill's assistant. He said he wanted to talk to me about something important. About you." James' heart skipped a beat. "Wait, what? Henry Cavill?" His mother nodded, still processing the call. "Yes. He said he was impressed by what you're trying to do. He wants to help you." "Help us?" Eleanor gazed at her mother, her eyes uncertain. James stood frozen, the weight of the words settling into his mind like a dream. He had never imagined that the kindness of a stranger, a celebrity no less, could be the spark that ignited something far beyond what he could have ever dreamed. Over the next few days, the plans started to fall into place. Henry Cavill's assistant arranged a meeting, and James found himself sitting in a small office, his mother by his side, facing the very person who had turned his world upside down with his generosity. Henry Cavill was no longer just the actor on the big screen. He was a man whose words and actions had given James a vision of a future he never thought possible. Henry smiled at them both, his presence as calm and reassuring as it had been in the store. "James," he said, leaning forward with a warmth that made James feel like they were just two people having a conversation, not a famous actor and a boy from a small town. "I believe you have big dreams, and I think you've got what it takes to make them happen." From that day forward, things began to change. Henry Cavill didn't just help James get started. He introduced him to people, to resources, to networks that would help him learn, grow, and eventually build the homes he had dreamed of. He gave James the tools, but more importantly, he gave him belief in himself. For James and his mother, that birthday wasn't just another year. It was the beginning of a new future. It wasn't just a year older for her, but a year where a shift in their lives began to unfold. One built on generosity, encouragement, and the belief that even the smallest dreams could grow into something extraordinary. James knew there was a long road ahead, but with the love and support of his mother and the unexpected but life-changing help of someone like Henry Cavill, he now saw a clear path forward. And no matter how difficult the journey, he had the one thing that mattered most: hope. As he and his mom sat together that evening, watching the sunset over Springfield, a new sense of purpose filled the air. It wasn't just the gift of a silver bracelet that had changed their lives. It was the gift of believing in something greater, something beyond themselves. And with that belief, the future looked brighter than it had ever seemed before.